Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. We are happy that you joined us today. We are a group of interesting people who don't like to stay in the box for conversations. And today that would be Cody, Peter, Jenny, and David. You can certainly go to the website, unfilteredvetdiscussions.com, to see our shining faces, our names, and more information about us. We are also on various social media platforms and podcast platforms. So please come join us on one or all. So today's topic is Pet Nutrition 2024. And Cody, do you want to round that out a little bit for us?
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to call the episode Dog Food, but apparently that's a taboo. Is that a four-letter word, Peter? Dog food?
No, it's a hashtag dog food because we have people who own cats and iguanas and horses and cows and pigs and sheep. And it's a global issue that you want to address, not just the dogs.
Got you. I am, as everybody knows, relatively new to the companion animal space. But when I was launching the FenVet brand, I had thought a lot about the future of the different profit centers within veterinary medicine, whether that be the services that we do or the products that we sell. And in my opinion, at that time, I really didn't want to focus on pet nutrition sales direct from clinic as a major profit center because I assumed the writing was on the wall. Me being in Canada, I had a different perspective because I got to watch what was going on in the US. And while we currently don't have any large disruptors within the traditional pet nutrition space, I thought it was just a matter of time until it was. And I didn't want to have a big portion of my veterinary clinic's revenues to be dependent on something that was going away at some point. So I chose at that time to not have an in-clinic retail pet food component, and that I would utilize an online store through my distribution center that I use to be able to allow access of those products to my pet owners, which I think are definitely medically appropriate in many different cases. So I'm not anti-pet nutrition by any means, but from a profit center standpoint within a veterinary clinic, I just thought that I wanted to focus more on services than on retail. So I've been thinking a lot about that actually recently. It's been one of the major projects that I've had on my plate is, re-looking at my online pet store. But I recognize I really didn't have a great history lesson in, veterinary clinic retail pet food experience. So since Peter is our resident historian, I would love to kind of hear what that is. And then from the rest of the group, like, what is the current state of the union of, how do we look at that now? And then what is the future of retail pet food within clinic as well?
Well, Cody, as the old man in the room. I'll go back to Noah, the first veterinarian who had all of the A through Z diets to feed all of the animals on the ark. And then I'll move forward about like 5 millennia to my experiences in my first practice that I worked in, which had prescription diets, really, and that was it. And there was not a great volume from that standpoint, to going to veterinary school, which had one line of prescription diets and a limited amount of education on nutrition, to going out into the practice world, my first job, which had all sorts of different diets, but was really a retail store masquerading as a veterinary hospital, to listening to consultants, and David will remember this, in the 80s and 90s, talking about the importance of selling pet food and the margins of it. And part of that, in my experience, was multifold. One was to get clients back into the hospital. And I think that was the focus of many consultants back in the 80s and 90s, was repeat visits, and pet food provided that. So whether it was prescription diets or maintenance diets, by having these products that were only available through veterinary hospitals, you were getting people to come back in. Oh, and by the way, while you're here, would you like to make another appointment? As I have matured, aged, and grayed a little bit, I have started to look differently on pet nutrition. And now, as a clinician, every pet eats. And when they stop eating, that's when they need me. But every pet eats. And so having a voice and knowledge and an understanding of nutrition, I think, is important in the veterinary field. But I also think it's part of team-based healthcare delivery, is that our team has that understanding. Do I feel that veterinarians need to be a retail store and provide that nutrition? I think they can. I think it's more important that they are influencers in determining the appropriate diets that are being eaten by patients, and have a voice in that. And oh, if by the way they can make a little bit of profit, they should do so. And I'm sorry to go long-winded. Now I'm going to jump to the pandemic, when all of a sudden we were offered through different portals the ability to have pet foods delivered on our behalf and make a small margin just for referring to these companies to deliver the food. And that should have been an epiphany for many of the practices that, oh, by the way, that large amount of physical plant that you have dedicated to 40-pound bags or 20-kilo bags of food, stuck them way in the back of the hospital, asked your 83-pound receptionist to run in the back and carry it. Oh, and you wonder why you have back injury reports. And oh, by the way, when you do have it stored up front, it seems that every golden retriever comes in and pees on the bottom bag in the lobby. Oh, and by the way, we have shrinkage, and that has nothing to do with George Costanza and everything to do with food that gets lost, that maybe we can find ways to make margins in our profits through other retail sources. And what's interesting, and I'd love to get David's take on this, is we have called it a profit center in the past, but was it really? And how much of an influence does the sale of nutrition have on the value of a practice when it comes down to transitioning them from one owner to another? How is that for a history lesson tying into the economics of the profession at the very end?
Yeah, I jump in on the numbers. I'm not a fan of pet foods, and even parasiticides. Have what you need, have what you believe in. And I do think vaccines, parasiticides, pet foods historically were probably not just a revenue center, but were a profit center. But the prices going up and the markups coming down, it's not now. So it's something you do out of convenience to the clients. Carry the minimum. I agree with you. Divert to the online store, especially the square footage. I mean, that's another exam room. That's a dental suite. I'm a huge fan of nutrition. I think nutrition, cats, and oral health are the three big opportunities in most practices. All three are relationship driven. It's about education. And so teaching the clients about nutrition, not making the choice for them, but help them become an educated consumer. There's good food out there. I just went and picked up for the office cats. Evet's sleeping on my lap now, but picked up the pet food. You don't have to go to the veterinary practice, but the doctors should be the source of education and the relationship. And use that space for something else, and the staff time to receive it, to process it, to enter it, to go back and fetch it. And use all of those resources for something else, more medicine than the foods themselves.
So I think in our practice, we have, so as I've said before, we do 24-hour on-call emergency. Okay. We do most of our lab work in-house because we're very impatient and we want to have those results right now. We do, we have our own pharmacy in-house because we don't want to tell people, hey, they have to go to the pharmacy to get these medications. That's how we feel about prescription diets. So we do have a small room that has a door on it. So it's both in the front, so my little receptionists don't have to run all the way to the back, but it has a door so that the golden retriever is not peeing on it. So we've tried to think of all of these things because we've seen it happen. But I think so. We only carry prescription diets. We carry different ones, obviously, for different things. But that way, so say we have a blocked cat come in, we can say, here's your first bag of this prescription urinary diet, right? This is your medication. This is what you need to keep this orange male cat on so that it doesn't block again. Now we're going to send you with your first bag. If you don't like it, it's guaranteed you can bring it back. We'll pick one of the other diets, okay? But we're also going to send you a prescription to the online store so you can get it auto shipped to you. So that way we can keep our inventory down. It keeps our, like what you were saying, David, the space less, the cost of the team members, all of those things less. But I do think if we aren't, and again, to your point, David, about being educated, there's so much information about nutrition, and I put it in quotes because some of it isn't, right? Like your cat is not meant to be on a vegan diet. They're carnivores. We learned that, grain-free diets are not right for every pet. There are things that are constant, and it's just like everything else in the world, right? Constant studies, constantly learning more, things are changing. So if that's the case, we need to be on top of that and we need to be educating. We also, I think, if we're talking about nutrition, is we shouldn't be pushing clients away. We have clients who feed, a raw diet. Now, raw diet, we educate them. That does not mean that you go to the grocery store, you buy 2 pounds of ground beef and you chuck it in their bowl. That is not a raw diet. You need these vitamins, you need these minerals. We give them books to read so that they can do it properly. And we've had clients that literally would spend 4 hours on a weekend making 2 weeks worth of food for their dog. And that got their dog with pancreatic cancer another 5 years of life. And so I do believe that nutrition has such a huge part of, it's such a huge part of medicine. It's such a huge part of, I believe this in humans, they don't talk about nutrition in humans. So that education piece and that service piece to me is what we need to be focusing on. So for me, the service is, here's your first bag. Cody, you're right. We are not making the markup on these items that we do on other things. That is not, it's not our profit center anymore. And I remember in the 90s, we're right. We were the only place you could get these things. Now you can get them everywhere. But to me, as a service for my client, okay, here's your first bag. Now we're going to set you up so that you can put it on auto ship. We still get, again, what Peter said, a small margin of profit, right? But it is something, but we don't have to put any work in for it. So that's my kind of, I guess, 2 cents on, yes, we have some product, but no, we're not overstocking,
Right.
and there is a way to kind of meet in the middle.
Is that what you're going to or doing, Cody, or something similar?
No, absolutely. So what I'm recognizing in all of that is I first wanted to, I guess, check myself as to, my Airdrie practice is a $6 million a year grossing practice, with literally $100,000 in pet nutrition sales. Like even though I have
really
an online,
small.
Very, very small, even though my online store exists, I have not done any sort of work in terms of adjusting the markup on it. One of the things I'm looking at right now is the auto ship discount option of like, what percentage should that be? How can I drive, better compliance? And one of the frustrating things that I'm seeing is the tools that exist for me as a veterinarian up here in Canada I really only have two options for, these plug and play type stores. And the user experience is not great. Like my store's user experience is not as good as what I'm looking, and I'm looking in the US, right? I'm looking at the retail options. I'm looking at other vet clinic stores. I'm looking at local options. For example, you can't see any prices on my store until you log in and you're a client. That's a function of the service provider that I'm providing, right? So that they're providing. So you have to log in. My team has to verify you're a client. So there's like several hour delay before you can actually get access into my store. The search function isn't great. I can't even type in the word Purina into my search bar because it's just like a really poor product. It just doesn't work very well. So even though I have that option, it just, when I'm looking at the future of, I don't know if I have the ability to even maintain that as a profit center as is. Now, my other concern is what is the traditional, if we look at it's 1998 at a typical general practice hospital that is doing $1 million, what was that as a profit center? And if I'm thinking about these practices that are being now evaluated and sold, should the new generation of practice buyers be thinking about this? Because what if it does go to zero because of disruption that's happened across the industry?
Well, I remember 1998. Jenny barely does.
Oh, yeah, right.
I think we were at about, from a revenue side. So here's the difference, Cody, and David will probably validate this. When you're looking at margin on food, if you just take what you pay and what you make, you're missing out on a large amount of expenses called
100%.
overhead, rent, human resources, shrinkage, et cetera. And so what most of the pet food suggested, it was a 30 to 40% markup back then. And I think when you got down with everything else, you might have made 20%. So you're making 20% on a 40-pound bag, which now costs a $40 bag, which now costs $80. So you made $8, maybe. You could have done so much more medically and made that same margin sneezing than you could by selling food. So I'll go back and I would suggest our revenue from dog food in pet nutrition in 1998 was 1%, maybe 2% of gross revenue. And the margin really was about 20%. David, how'd I do?
Yeah, I think even now we look at income to expense ratios when we're diagnosing inventory cost of goods sold issues. And in the pet foods, the historic ratio target was 1.4. So if you take your pet food nutrition revenues, divide it by the expense, you'd want to see around 1.4, which is that 40% markup. Now, what I see most commonly, though, especially in practices that it's the alphabet diets, the nutraceuticals, we see maybe 1.2 at best. But that's because of a lower markup for increased adoption. And, in general, in a typical small animal practice, when we look at parasiticides, flea, tick, heartworm, and nutrition, non-doctor generated revenues, usually it's about 5, maybe up to 10%. Now, it can be higher if there's a lot more boarding, ancillary services. But the pet foods and parasiticides as a percent of overall revenues have been trending downward. And I'm okay with that trend because then that's more service focused and medicine and education and relationship driving, which is better for the practice, better for the clients, the pets. Everyone wins when the focus is on the medicine.
And I think too, the reason in 1998 that yes, our revenue, right, 1.4% is not great, but we were also the only place you could get that. Like there wasn't the Petco, the PetSmart, Chewy, there weren't Amazon, there really weren't all of these places where you could go and get these pet foods. You could go to the grocery store and you could get your puppy chow, or whatever, but you couldn't get as the Hill Science Diet and the Purina and all of these foods started coming out with, Royal Canin with, or IAMS, I think it was at the time. They were prescription diets. They had a purpose. They had a disease that they were going to treat, but you couldn't get them anywhere else. Now, I think, Cody, to what you're talking about is you can. They have prescription diets at Petco. They can, our clients can take a prescription in, or they can reach out to us and they can go and buy them there. They don't have to get them from us. But at the time in the 90s, when I was in veterinary practice and, out of high school, Peter, but I wasn't out of college yet though. But, then we were those people. And now, heck, you can get it everywhere. So it is where I think this is true of all of these things, all of the things that we sell. Like, I taught one of my team members came up to me and go, why don't we sell leashes and bowls? And I'm like, why would I, when you can get those everywhere? I don't want them. We are a veterinary hospital. I don't go to my doctor and expect them to sell, groceries and exercise equipment. And, I just don't do that. So why would anybody expect that of us? We are a medical facility. So I think so much, like David, everything you're saying about just focusing on the medicine, focusing on the service. Yes, that has to be your priority if you're going to survive.
So, Peter, do you want to wrap us up for today?
Well, I'm going to throw it back at Cody and say, you got a history lesson from Grandpa. You got a financial lesson from Uncle Dave and Aunt Jenny. And you have to make a decision as to where this fits in your service mix or product mix that you provide for your clients. And so my question back to Cody is, did we ever answer your question?
Yes, well, you definitely placated my concern that I was being a futurist idiot thinking about where my practice was set up and where it was going. And I think that this was a great conversation for the rest of the industry to reflect on a small segment of the things that we do that maybe this does fit for some practices and will fit for some practices in some foreseeable future. But I think as a whole, it's just a great thought experiment for every aspect of our veterinary hospitals to just think and rethink. Just because we've always done it a specific way doesn't mean that that's what's right today, or doesn't mean that's what's right in the future.
And I'm going to just wrap Cody's comment up because you said as a whole, WHOLE. And I think going forward, that nutrition is a whole, HOLE, that we are falling into. And we may want to step around.
The product, nutrition.
Correct.
Nutrition product.
Right. Right.
Little qualifier.
Good job.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Wait, before we,
Okay.
Kelly, one more thing. I want to apologize to all of the food companies out there if you feel that we are dissing pet nutrition. I think we really are here supporting how important pet nutrition is, but we're also more importantly supporting the next vision of what veterinary practice's role in pet nutrition is in collaboration with the pet nutrition industry, which is really client convenience from that standpoint.
Good call. Good call.
Well said.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we look forward to sharing some time with you on the next Unfiltered Vet discussion. Until later.